if the jury nullifies those regulations because they found that the Emergency Act was illegally brought in, that is saving our country.
All right, so we are back with my good friend and sister, Jane. How are you?
Hey, brother from another mother.
And you're my sister from another mister. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So today we're going to continue our little chat about how awesome the Canadian Bill of Rights is. And I'm going to intro just because everybody's already knows who you are, which is awesome. And I'm just going to intro what for all the people watching this video, that today Jane and I are going to be setting out to prove the following. Okay. We're going to prove that we do indeed have a constitution. We're also going to set out to prove that the Constitution cannot be repealed or removed in perpetuity. We're going to talk about that. That the Constitution is a one-sided promise made by those acting in government positions. They are on the hook for promising to us, the people, that they will uphold our civil liberties in the Constitution. They are liable for failure in duty. Not us, them. Another point, the government, via the Constitution, has agreed that our rights are inalienable, which means God-given. They can't take them away. And guess what? The definition says you can't give them away either, and we're going to talk more about that. Another point, that we the people all have a right to a jury trial for any charge or claim, regardless of how major or minor the charge is, and that's a very important right, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to introduce, at least sometime, to the Magna Carta, and that the Magna Carta is and continues to be intact. And the other thing that we're going to introduce is, or further prove in this interview, along with Jane here, that the Canadian Bill of Rights recognizes and confirms all of what I have mentioned, and more, by the way. All right? So let's get into it. Let's start with, hey, Jane, some people are trying to claim we have no constitution. It's all gone. They've torn it up. They've repealed it. It's all gone. What do you think, Jane?
I'm not supposed to say who, and I won't, but I had news today of another Bill of Rights win. Freedom of press.
Ooh.
In the midst of the pandemic. The right to freedom of the press was confirmed by the court today. I can't say the details because the person involved is going to be he's somewhat of a celebrity, and he's going to be making his own public statement, and then I can talk in detail after. But another victory now to be added to our long list of, also, I don't know if do you know Rich Angel from Windsor? Droulard?
Yeah,
in Windsor? Yeah, he got all his charges dropped. Self-rep.
Okay.
And the convoy charges all dropped.
Okay. Well, that's great.
He did such a good job. He just hammered them about the disclosure. And he got all kinds of really juicy documents showing that Mendocino was interfering and the Crown was interfering with the police, instructing the police.
That is
actually
fantastic.
Inappropriately instructing the police. So we're going to be able to do something, I think, with those documents in the trials coming up, the convoy charges.
And in his case, was he using the bill?
Yeah, yeah. He's a diehard bill guy.
Diehard Bill of Rights. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure and clarify that for everybody that he did not use the poo-poo charter. He used the awesome Canadian Bill of Rights.
He started off with a lawyer. I don't know how long. I think about 6 months. And he ran up a bill, $15,000.
Wow.
And all the lawyer did was like show up in court and adjourn.
Right. And then bill, and then send the invoice and send the invoice.
Yeah.
That's
so
amazing.
Finally he just that's enough. And he just I shouldn't say it was like a gradual thing till he finally just was over the top. He's going to do it himself. He was nervous at first, but the more he did it, the better he got at it and the more empowered he was by it. And then ultimately successful in the end.
And what could be better than you yourself as a citizen knowing your true civil liberties and your rights and knowing how to maneuver that rather than always having to go to some very, very highly paid person who may or may not do a good job. And best as we can tell in these particular cases lately, I have to tell you, they're not impressing me with their approach. They're giving people big bills and they're doing little to nothing. I mean,
well, the problem is the way we engage with them. You turn all your power over to them. That's not necessary. I mean, in that they're in the field, they're going to know a lot more about the law and how to defend, and they can give you all kinds of instruction that can be very beneficial for self-defense, but it's not necessary to turn everything over to them. It leaves you so powerless and easy to manipulate, and that's what we see often. Not always, but often we see that. So to avoid that, you can engage them and pay them for their information. You can even pay them to come to court with you and sit beside you, so that you can say it's co-counsel, and then you can tell the judge you're going to present your own case. But if something comes up that you need consultation for, you can turn and say, what's this or what's that or whatever you need to do, and that's perfectly legal. You can do
awesome.
that. I've done it. I've done that before. That's how I learned about it in the first place, is co-counsel.
That is great. So I want to talk about how for example, we do indeed have a constitution. I want to talk about that. And one of the things, because prior to the Bill of Rights, and we're not saying, we know that the Bill of Rights is awesome, but we actually had our rights prior to the bill because, again, they are God-given. So if you don't mind, Dom, I want to share the screen real quick and just show the case law real quick that we're talking about here. And I think it was, yes, we've talked about this before, but I think it's really important. It's that 1938 case law, Jane, that we have, and that's, again, 1938. So this is prior to the Canadian Bill of Rights, and it was references Alberta statutes, the Bank Taxation Act, the Credit of Alberta Regulation Act, and the Accurate News and Information Act. So if I'm recalling this correctly, this was where the province of Alberta was trying to, for example, regulate the news and the information and getting in the way of freedom of press. And there was
actually, they went so far as to specifically say that the press could not criticize them. It was a social credit government,
right,
and the press, by and large, did not like them. So everything they went to do, the press was critical. So they just said, not allowed to criticize the government.
And of course, making a long story short, they take this to, I'm assuming, the Supreme Court of Canada, as it says right here.
Yeah,
right here. There you go. And in the decision, a judge says there's an implied Bill of Rights. He actually says that in the judgment.
And where that stems from is the preamble in the Constitution says that the Canadian Constitution is based on the principles of the UK. And the UK had a Bill of Rights, which had freedom of, in this case, freedom of press. There was a long-standing common law acknowledgement of freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, going back to, oh my God, like where it gets articulated clearly is around the 1400s.
Wow.
The judge, Weinstein, who adjudicated Norm Blanchfield's case. She referred to the the Wittenberg press. That was the 1400s, where there was the clergy of the day were censoring, and that went to court, and that was successful. He was successful with that.
And this further proves our point that the Bill of Rights is amazing because it codified, but it was codifying what we already had. So we need people to understand that it was just codifying what we already had. For lack of better words, making a wonderful document, very simple, straightforward, straight ahead, but documenting with no loopholes our civil liberties, and codifying it, but only, again, to make sure everybody understands, codifying what we already had because they are God-given rights. So even the
Yeah.
Canadian Bill of
And
Rights doesn't say
yeah,
it gives you the rights. It's
yeah,
their God-given rights, and the Bill of Rights recognizes that. Shall we maybe
yes.
show that for a
Yeah, and
moment?
as they evolve in common law, that's supposed to be based on our like the citizens' capacity, because that's through jury, right? Their capacity to know right from wrong and to be able to determine, the justice issues involved in whatever case they're looking for.
And
So
what's
it
wonderful,
even those cases was an acknowledgement. So it's not even believed that in common law, like the right came from the common law case.
right?
It's looked at, it was confirmed or articulated and confirmed
So
with that case.
much like looking at the Canadian Bill of Rights here at the front, it says an act for recognition,
Yeah,
recognizing it.
yeah,
That doesn't mean creating it. It's
exactly,
recognizing it, mainly basically saying we recognize these rights because you already have them. And we're just saying we recognize that. And that's, again, the
exactly.
commitment on the government's part,
Yeah.
right?
And I
So,
can't help it. I can't help but bring up the Poo Poo Charter. Section 1
okay, let's do that.
says, instead of this says human rights and fundamental freedoms. So that's very important, human right. So when you go to do the charter, it says it guarantees your rights, not your human rights, just rights and freedoms, not fundamental freedoms. Fundamental meaning they cannot be taken away for any reason.
Yeah,
And
so
then
we're
it also says, just a second, I'm running out of battery here.
So what Jane is saying,
It,
by the way, everybody, is that it's missing in the charter. It's missing the word fundamental. And fundamental, as you mentioned, it basically means of central importance. They removed that.
yep,
So that's a very important point that the charter does not have, that it's fundamental, because they're
yep.
already getting into the psyche of trying to say, well, they're not really fundamental. That's
Yeah,
why they removed
and
the word.
exactly, and human rights.
And
That
so again, guys, right
implies that
there.
you're born with that. You're human. Well, there you got those rights inherently. Inalienable would
Right.
match with the concept of human rights. But in the charter, they just forgot to put that word in.
Yeah, a couple,
Just plain
fundamental and
plain.
human.
Yeah, exactly.
Two
and then
pretty
and
big
then
words there they missed.
and then if that isn't enough of a clue, it goes on to say rights and freedoms set out in it,
In it, right here, guys. So
meaning
basically,
the government issued rights.
right, which that goes against the under the supremacy of God and their inalienable rights, because we didn't give it to you, but God gave it. But they're actually saying the opposite. They're saying, no. If you're using the charter, you're declaring that we're the ones who gave it to you, and therefore we can take it away from you. And that's exactly what
Exactly.
is
And the
said
next,
here.
the next part of the same section says, and they're not to be violated unless they have a demonstratively justified reason. What is it, in a fair
in a,
democratic
in a
society?
free and
Free
democratic
democratic
society.
society.
Right. But
Yeah.
how free can you be if they get to decide what those limits are and they remove
And do it willy nilly.
very willy-nilly. Very
Yeah. We have an
willy-nilly.
emergency. Wham bam. All your rights are gone.
And this is where you're talking about where this is a very convoluted document. It kind of comes against itself all the time.
Yeah.
And by
Well,
the
right
way,
out of the gate, like in the first, soon as it speaks to the issue, bang,
boom.
they undermine right away. But
Yes.
there's more crap in there too.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, to point out its convoluted positioning, but it also had to admit in section 26, the guarantee in this charter of certain rights and freedoms shall not be construed as denying the existence of any other rights or freedoms that exist in Canada. Canadians
Woohoo.
have rights and freedoms under laws other than the charter.
Yeah.
So it's even having to acknowledge, right, that
Yes.
your rights already existed and there's other ones. However, once again, as we've been trying to point out, as soon as you give them that section 1, right, you basically give that section to them, and now all of a sudden they can basically override anything that you show up with.
Yeah. And
With that section.
in a conversation with the judge, she said to him, Mr. Freedom, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms superseded the Bill of Rights. Like you don't know anything. And then Dave says, "Well, Section 26," and then right away she shuts him down by starting to talk and change the subject. And then it never came up again. In the next like 2 minutes, she was talking about, "Well, Dave, I recommend that you use the Bill of Rights and the Charter together." La
Yeah.
la 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 la. So but she didn't say, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right." But she just started talking over him, and
Yep.
then in the rest of her conversation, it was confirmed that she heard him,
Because again,
and she's done with that. Yeah.
because that judge is clearly not understanding that
Oh,
she's
she
under
understood.
contract. What I mean by is
Yeah.
that she's the one that's under contract to be proper towards
Oh,
the
true that. Yeah.
citizens. And
Yeah.
so here, if you look in Section 26, it continues and says the purpose of Section 26 is to
Yeah.
ensure that these rights or freedoms are not extinguished because they are not expressly spelled out in the Charter. So
Yeah.
in other
There you
words,
go.
those other rights are there, and just
Yeah.
because we don't say that you have them here doesn't mean you don't have them, right?
Over there.
That's
And
right.
they're better over there because there's no limitation over there in the Bill of
100%.
Rights.
No,
Yeah, no
no question about
limitation.
it.
Like the Section 1 is the title of that, or the handle for that is the limitation clause.
Yep.
Or another one is the Mack truck clause, because it's big enough. It's a big enough loophole for a Mack truck to drive through.
Yeah. Because what we're basically saying, folks, is that because it's just kind of where's the boundaries on this? The answer is
Yeah.
there isn't any. That's
No.
the answer. There's literally, and
Yeah.
that's why guys like Peckford, for example, are going around saying they're not using this properly. And I've been saying over and over again, they're using it exactly how you wrote it.
Well, Dave and Rebecca and I, and you also, before the cases started coming out, we were predicting specifically how they were going to deal with the public health contest, science contest,
Yep.
and the outcomes, and Section 1 and the pandemic. All of that you can see in videos that predate any of those cases that came out. So how would we know that if that wasn't what this, like, if we weren't interpreting this correctly, how would we know the outcome?
Right. And of course, we know that the Church of God, now Jordan Peterson, and this is where we speak to, well, okay, listen, I don't have to decide whether people are controlled or not. What I can do is just simply say, look, if you continue to not recognize that using this is giving you the exact results that Section 1 says it's going to give to you, then we're not
Exactly.
aligned. We're not aligned. Right?
This is
We're
it.
not aligned.
And I just saw a video the other day that you and I did a long time ago, and you were saying you should never use the bill and the charter together because the bill will override the charter because of Section 24, blah blah blah. And
No,
this
excuse
is
me.
before,
I was saying that the charter, because of that Section 1, would
Yeah,
override the Bill of
override.
Rights,
Yeah.
not because
I
it
said
has
it wrong.
power to, right?
Oh no,
But because
yeah, because you empower the judge because of Section 24. You empower the judge to be able to override common law and override law. So if it can override law, it can override the Canadian Bill of Rights. But
boom.
fortunately,
That was in the
yes,
Beth Martin's
yes,
interview. Yes.
and we had a perfect example of that being enacted with this Alberta decision with Henshaw. They said that her going to the cabinet and getting the cabinet to vote on the COVID measures was ultra virus of the Alberta Healthcare Act. So it said in there that, okay, so they deemed all of the COVID measures like whatever, like unlawful because it violated. But it went on to say, but had she just, pulled them out of her butt without going to the cabinet, they would not have violated the charter because it's reasonable limits. And that was lockdown, mask, vaccination, all the whole thing was all part of that. And it said so it wouldn't have violated the charter or the Alberta Bill of Rights.
Right. Because the Alberta. Go ahead.
Yeah, because they used the charter there. So in the decision, they used their whatever discretion to say Section 1 applies to the bill, the
Right. In
Alberta
that
bill.
particular case, because just so in case people don't know, Alberta as a province has actually an amazing Alberta Bill of Rights, and it reads like almost verbatim like the Canadian Bill of Rights, but it's provincial. So what they did, what this specific person did was they brought in the Alberta Bill of Rights, which was fantastic, but then they messed it all up by bringing the charter, because as soon as you bring in the charter, you basically invoke this section 24, which now you got no right to a jury essentially, right? Because now you just
Yep.
give it a state paid judge, and he doesn't have to look at common law anymore, he or
No.
she. And then you go all the way
Or
back up
laws,
to
or laws,
or
or
laws.
laws,
Right.
common law or laws, because you see at the end it says to fashion a remedy that they find
Ooh, let's
appropriate and just in the situation. So that means discretion, unfettered, like
right here.
unlimited discretion. Yeah.
To obtain such remedy as the court, which means the judge,
Judge, yes.
considers appropriate and just in the circumstances. Do you see how open wide that this is? There's absolutely no boundaries on this whatsoever. And so then on top of it now,
Section 7 too.
Yep, they got section
7.
7. Yep. Which essentially says in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice, right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean, Jane?
Well, in the bill, it says due process of law.
Bill of Rights, Canadian Bill of Rights?
Bill of Rights. It says life, liberty, security of person, enjoyment of property, not to be deprived thereof, except by due process of law. And due process of law has to do with the common law and all the procedures and our juries and all of that stuff is our thing of law. But when the term fundamental justice, I mean, it's a very nice sounding term, but the problem with it is that one of the items in fundamental justice is the idea of what's morally acceptable at a given time. And so by putting your rights, all of your basic rights in that section with fundamental justice, it means that the judge that you just gave unfettered discretion has the discretion to look around and have the opinion that the people want, for example, mandatory masks or mandatory backs or anything, whatever he thinks. And because we've given him that or her that discretion, you can't appeal that effectively either, because you would have to prove that wasn't really his opinion.
Right.
He was just putting it out there, but it wasn't really his opinion. Well, how the hell would you ever do that?
Yeah, you won't be able to. And then, of course, to add insult to injury, they have indeed that section 1 that basically says reasonable limits that they get to decide. Oh, yeah. See, under this fundamental justice, and since my opinion is that definitely the majority of people really think everybody should be doing ABC, so we're going to limit your right to not have to do that ABC, and now you have to. Otherwise, there's that threatened punishment, and that's guilty until proven innocent, and it botches up the whole thing. Whereas when you go to the Canadian Bill of Rights, not so. That's just the bottom line. Not so. And this is because there's also the presumption of innocence very, very much declared here in the bill as well. And I think that's in 2E and F. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So we talked about this last week. You can't deprive a person of the right to a fair hearing in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice for the determination of his rights and obligations, nor can you deprive a person charged with a criminal offense of the right to be presumed innocent. That's huge right there until proven guilty. And of course, here's that wonderful line, according to law in a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal, there's your introduction to jury, or of the right to reasonable bail without just cause, right? So that's a one heck of a two-packed punch there that says trial by jury, and that's encoded. And we know that the Queen signed it, so she authenticated, if you will. Not that we necessarily needed it, but let's use it since she did it. She authenticated that the Constitution does indeed still stand.
Exactly. One of the criticisms of the bill is, they could just change it. They can just snap out a change with an act of parliament. But it doesn't just say an act of parliament. There's two issues. There's due process of law for the fundamental ones at the top, like life, liberty, security of person, enjoyment of property. That has to be the application of due process of law. So that's all your rights and all that. So they can't just flip that into an act presented to Parliament for discussion and vote to eliminate. That's A. And B, it doesn't just say an act of Parliament. It says an act of Parliament that expressly states they're going to remove the rights, like notwithstanding your right, they're going to bring in whatever. Like let's say they're going to say, notwithstanding your religious rights, we're going to close all the churches. So they have to let you know exactly what they're doing, which is different than what they did with the COVID. There was implicit denial of rights. They didn't expressly state it, right? They say they're closing the businesses, they're masking and like all of that. But it didn't expressly say your right to informed consent is denied. Your right to privacy is denied with the vaccination stuff. Your right to enjoyment of property is denied with them closing down your businesses. All that. They just implicitly undermined your rights. The Bill of Rights would not allow that. It would have to expressly state, notwithstanding your religious rights or your right to freedom of speech or whatever right they're going to go after. And they haven't touched 1 inch of it since 1960.
And
the only thing they've done is a couple of additions. Like they changed, it used to say the War Measures Act, and now it says the Emergency Measures Act. And they brought in the Statutory Instruments Act in 85, I believe it was. So they had to add a reference to it in there. And that's it. That's all your changes you've had since 1960. So if they could just snap their finger, why didn't Trudeau Sr. just snap his finger and get rid of the whole Bill of Rights and bring in his charter?
And the answer is they couldn't. That's the only answer you got. They couldn't. And that's why it's right here in this 1985, which received ascension as well in 1988, that they have to also adhere to the Canadian Bill of Rights. And that's well after the Poo-Poo Charter. So if they could have done it, then they would have. They couldn't. And of course, one of the reasons, would you mind, Dom? I think we got the Magna Carta, but I don't think we have it up there anywhere. I don't think we do. I think we have that as a PDF somewhere. There you go. So I'm just wanting Jane to see this because we know some history, because ultimately we won't say that this was the beginning of it, because we all understand that as soon as we were born with these rights. With that said, we want to give at least a little history, and this was done in 1215, correct, Jane?
Yeah, 1255, I think it was.
Okay,
the 15th of June. Okay. Was it 15 or 55? It was the 15th of June.
Okay, 15th of June. Okay. I'm pretty sure it was, I could be wrong, but I think it was 2015, but you guys will know. We'll see it. It says right at the top of here, it says, abuses by King John caused a revolt by nobles who compelled him to execute this recognition of rights for both noblemen and ordinary Englishmen. It established the principle that no one, including the king or a lawmaker, is above the law.
The law. Isn't that lovely?
And when we talk about in perpetuity, this is what we're talking about. So the Canadian Bill of Rights, as awesome as it is, didn't give us the rights. We already had them because we were born with them, right? And therefore, this Magna Carta, they can't remove it. It's in place. It's a commitment. It's a promise made by God. That's right. And yeah, that's right. Because the promise was not only made to the people, it says for to God. So let's see if because I think this is actually, and I would recommend everybody, if you get an opportunity to, go through this, because it's not that long actually. I think, you know what? I got a little bar here. Let me see. Because I remember section 39, I think, if I recall correctly. I think 39 and 40 are pretty stellar. But everything in here is great. But it says, here's in section 39, it says, no freeman shall be taken or imprisoned or disseized or exiled or in any way destroyed, nor will we go upon him nor send upon him except by the lawful judgment of his peers. Woo-hoo. Of his peers. You see that? This is trial by jury. You don't get to just be one guy say, I don't like that person over there. Or by the law of the land. Okay. And then it says, to no one will we sell in section 40, to no one will we refuse or delay right or justice.
Woohoo.
Right. And notice we
Nice.
won't delay it. And I have
Yeah.
to tell you, well, I think you would agree with me that they've oftentimes made things very painful by delaying things on
Yes.
people,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is something this is not a new tactic. It's the same tactic. And then, of course, I'm going to bring in section 61 here because this one's quite interesting. And here's that for God, right? Since move over for God and the amendment of our kingdom, and for the better allaying of the quarrel that has arisen between us and our barons, we have granted all these concessions, desirous that they should enjoy them in complete and firm endurance forever. We give and grant. Remember, the king's got to sign this, folks.
Yeah.
It's right. It's not the people, it's the king, right? So this again is a promise to God, right? Is a one-sided promise from those who have the let's say the positioning to uphold, which is what they're supposed to do, our civil liberties. And that's why they put endurance forever. We give and grant to them the underwritten security, namely that the barons choose 5 and 20, that's 25 barons of the kingdom, whomsoever they will, who shall be bound with all their might to observe and hold and cause to be observed the peace and liberties. Okay, that's their job, to observe the peace and the liberties we have granted and confirmed. And that's the government granting and confirming it to the people. Remember that.
Yeah.
To them by this our present charter, so that if we or our justiciar, I'll say it like that, or our bailiffs or any one of our officers shall in anything be at fault towards anyone, or shall have broken any one of the articles of this peace or of this security, and the offense be notified to forbearance of the foresaid 25, the said forbearance shall repair to us or our justiciar, I'll say it like that, if we are out of the realm, and laying the transgression before us, petition to have that transgression redressed without delay.
Nice.
And if we shall not have corrected the transgression, meaning the government,
Yeah.
right? In the
Yeah.
event of our being out of the realm, if our justiciar shall not have corrected it within 40 days, reckoning from the time it has been intimated to us, or to our justiciar if we should be out of the realm. So again, I'm assuming what they're saying there, some kind of representative, right? Okay. The forbearance aforesaid shall refer that matter to the rest of the 25 barons, and those 25 barons shall, together with the community of the whole realm, distrain and distress us in all possible ways.
Wow.
And if I'm understanding this, he's
By
basically
seizing
saying,
their castles and their land and their possessions
right?
in any other way they can until redress has been obtained
So
as
that's-
they deem fit,
So if
saving harmless. Oh my God! Like it's two fingers at them. Like,
yeah,
you're not going to abuse us and exploit us anymore.
'Cause
And
if you do,
you're going to pay.
yeah, we're going to take your stuff because that's our stuff that we're letting you live there. So if you want to keep that stuff, this is how you're going to roll.
Exactly.
This is how this is written,
if you want
folks.
to continue to be the king,
Yeah,
buck up.
that's right. Bug it up. You got to do the right thing. And if you don't, right? And notice this, and it says, as the people deem fit, right?
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
As the people
That's
deem
a jury,
fit.
by jury, right?
That's
Probably.
you know what?
Because
I
they
think
said
we should.
earlier, they said, I forget what it was, the community. That's probably the jury.
That's
There
right.
used to be members of the community.
Right. He said, you know what? We're taking his stove and we're taking his toilet. That's what we're going to do. And we deem that fit.
One.
The gold one. That's right. All he gets is a porta potty. That's it. That's all he's getting until he works this thing out. Do you see the difference in the attitude here? And that's what we're trying. I think, Jane and Rebecca and so many people, Dave Freedom, people out there, we're trying to remind everybody.
Exactly.
No, the power
and,
is with the people. And this is where the Constitution comes from, if you will.
Well, this is it. And I want to make this point. We make it all the time, but I just want it just fits in here really nicely. We don't need a revolution.
Right.
We already have this. Why would you have a revolution in a democratic process that has your rights and freedoms codified in a strong, enforceable piece of legislation? Why on earth would we want to do that? So what we have to do is what they're doing there. Say, hey, that's enough.
That's it. We're taking your favorite motorcycle.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the attitude here. So if you don't mind,
Well,
I'm going to
this is
share
what
this.
we're telling people to do. We're telling them to sue these people personally that transgressed your rights as an official. If they're an official,
Right.
sue them personally, because Ron Cirelli versus Duplessis
If you don't mind, we'll
says
stop
that.
sharing for a moment there, Dom. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Jane.
Okay, uh, uh, Ron Cirelli versus Duplessis is
Mm-hmm.
a piece of case law that specifies that if an official violates your rights, they're personally liable. And it says in it from the prime minister all the way down to the tax collector
Wow.
are
Okay.
personally out of their own pocket. So this, what you just read me, fits exactly what we've been asking people to do, because it's all legal there as you read it, because it was agreed and brought in. So now the same principle is already worked into our process. So we just have to use it.
And
It's right there.
that's from the 1200s, and we have to once again just repeat that the Canadian Bill of Rights codified that very thing.
Yeah, that's right. So we have various cases going on right now. We use small claims, even if the claims are for larger amounts, because it takes a lot of resources to go through, and it's very, very complex and time consuming to go through the Superior Court. So we're using the small claims court, but we're using that concept of if a police officer is abusive in some way or violates your rights, then we hold them personally liable. And we even have one where there's an elderly couple that are suing Mazda for being abusive with regard to the mask policy. And it's so cool because both Mazda, the head office, and the dealership both are being sued, right? Because they're two different entities.
Okay.
And they both tried to tell the court that they needed to be taken off the action because there was no cause of action. And they were, because we were using the Bill of Rights, and they were saying the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to private individuals. Well, the stupid dummies wrote in their submissions that they were following the law, they were enforcing the law. That mask mandate was enforcing the law. So we're like, thanks, because it's in their submission. So we say Section 25 of the Criminal Code says an individual who's enforcing the law in Section 25. So because it's in the Criminal Code, it makes it a federal matter. If it's a federal matter, automatic Canadian Bill of Rights. So that's what we argued. And the judge said, I'm putting this over for trial. So he accepted our argument because if it just didn't apply straight up, then he would have cut it and cut them out, because you don't want to waste court time and everything too. So he was agreeing that there was a cause. We have to prove it still. I mean, we didn't win that day, but we won the notion that if there is a violation here, there can be. We won that, but there can be, because they were trying to say there can't even be any violation because it doesn't apply to them. And the judge didn't agree with that. There could be, right? Because
and therefore trial.
Section 25, therefore trial. Yeah.
And
so
then by the way, as we were talking about before, they could bring a jury into that picture.
Oh yeah, I'd love that.
that
Actually,
might be exciting.
You know what? I'm going to ask her to do it. I think she will do it. Actually, she's done all her paperwork, and it's beautiful. And this couple, they're self-representing and presenting and everything, and doing all their paperwork. I marvel at it. There's 3 nurses that are suing a Toronto hospital for the vaccination, like they were dumped out because of vaccination, and they went after the supervisor that actually specifically did it, and they said personally. So they're working hard to try and say, you can't do it personally. Oh yeah? What about this case law? And they have nothing to say about the case law. They just try to ignore it and say, try to get around it and stuff. But I don't think they're going to be able to.
That's great. So I'm just going to leave this section off with saying this, and then we'll move on to the other subject about the definitions of inalienable rights. But bottom line is the Constitution is not the source of our civil liberty. Our rights exist as soon as we are, I would say, conceived. Yes. But the Constitution is a written statement that binds the government, binds them, okay?
Yeah.
And anyone enforcing law, right, will end up falling under that position of, okay, well, now you're liable. And that's another push why I keep telling businesses, listen, don't just do whatever they say, because then guess what? If you're the one that's doing the deed, then you're on the hook for it. Okay, this is really bottom line. You can easily be on the hook for it. And we need to move citizens to really communicate that what you're doing, you're part of that binding as far as we're concerned. And if you're told by someone who's supposed to serve the citizens to do something that you're not supposed to do, and now you're doing it, well, now you're both in the wrong. That's all that's happened here, right? So let's talk about the inalienable rights definition. Would you mind hitting share screen again for me, Brother Dom? And because we want to, I think what we need is the, that's right. Okay, yeah, we're back. Thank you, bro. All right, so the definition that we had originally, I think we have that here. Okay, here's the original definition. This would be in the 8th edition of the Black's Law Dictionary. For anybody who wants to Google that out, it's on page 2218. Okay, the word inalienable, I've got it, well, it's highlighted here. Okay, and it basically means this. It's very straightforward. Not transferable or assignable. Period. That's it. Not transferable or assignable. I would argue, and I think Jane would too, to say, well, that means if it's not transferable, I can't even give them away.
That's exactly what it means.
Right? And if you really stop and think about it, how can I give my civil liberties to Jane, particularly when she has her own civil liberties anyways, first of all, and how is it even possible for me to transfer my civil liberties over to another human being and then lose my civil liberties?
Why would anybody ever do that rationally? Like with no
rationally.
Coercion or, misrepresentation or anything? Because what would be worth it? What would, like, I'll give you a job as long as you agree to be a slave. Oh, well, okay.
And you have to, and we have to, look at whatever, like we have to, and you have to always wear a funny, muzzle on your face all the time.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's got to be a really thick one where you can barely breathe. And then, right? So then you walk into coercion and extortion. And so now the definition, and we want everybody to understand this too. At least I'm going to put this out there, and Jane, you can verify. They can only make you not see the Canadian Bill of Rights. They couldn't rip it out. And same thing here. They can try to do whatever they want. Just because they do something doesn't mean that it's lawful. Doesn't mean that it's legal. So this would apply here. They can change the definition legally and lawfully. No, they can't. They can't. Even if they try to do it. So that would be like me having a contract, let's say, with someone that's renting my apartment. And I said, okay, it's $900 per month. And then someone walks in and says, by the way, we just changed the definition of month. Oh, to what? A year. What? No, you can't just change it like that. Oh, yes, we can. No, you can't. No, you can't. That's the answer there. But they'll convince you they can. And if you buy into it, if you buy into the position that they're allowed to, I send you right back to the Magna Carta. Let's go get their golden toilets.
I'll give you one example, and I don't have it confirmed 100%, but a few months ago, Toronto Dominion decided we are going to do whatever we want with your data. And if you don't agree to let us do it, we're going to cut off all of your line of credit and your card, the bank card, all that stuff. And
if that's not extortion, I don't know what is.
Well, this is it. But as far as I know, people said, no flipping flying way. That's our data. That's our property. You don't have any authority to make such a decision without consent. Blah, blah, blah. And it looks like they've backed down. They might not. They might be just regrouping, and they're going to come at it again. I'm not saying it's over,
right?
No, but they cooled their jets somewhat because they were right up in people's face with the letter saying, "This is the way it's going to be, and if you don't like it, we will punish you."
Right, and here's the bottom line: we have to prepare everybody for this. it's never necessarily ever really over. There's always potentially someone somewhere that's going to try to pull off these moves. And so that's why we really encourage people to empower themselves with the truth of what they've been given, which is a written statement binding the people who act on behalf of the government. And we need everybody to understand that. We need to bring that into the language and the psychological position of the citizen. All right. And so now here's what they're trying to suggest is the new definition of inalienable. Okay. And here the word is with the word rights. Rights which are not capable of being surrendered or transferred. But then it says without the consent.
Yeah.
Do you see what they did there? They added a few words. No, the original was they're just not transferable. Period.
Yeah.
And that can really slide by you if you're not careful. But the reality is that's a big enough difference. Here it just plainly says you can't transfer them, you can't assign it. Okay? Period.
And that's the long-standing, reasonable definition, because inalienable, in there it says something. Did it say in that one version? In one version it said inalienable is the same as inherent.
Okay.
Just let me look up inherent, because inherent,
says,
how can you give something away that's inherent? You know what I mean?
Right. Here it also says, by the way, it's also termed unalienable. It does say that. So don't let anybody...
Here's what inherent means. Okay? So they can't even properly change the definition. It's ridiculous. Existing in something as a permanent, essential, or characteristic attribute.
Love it.
Okay?
Period.
So they can't change the definition of inalienable to suit their purposes, because it makes no sense.
But what they're attempting to do is make people think they can.
Exactly.
And that's our point. No, they can't. Go back to the Magna Carta.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
No, they cannot. Right?
Yeah.
And so it says rights which are not capable of being surrendered or transferred. If it stopped there, it would be fine. But they threw in without the consent of the one possessing such rights.
Yeah,
and by the way, they put the examples of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, due process. Who would want to get rid of due process and equal protection of the laws? Who would want to get rid of that? And your freedom of speech, what you'd want to get rid of that? Unless you consent to it. Yeah, how would I consent to that but for extortion, coercion, and threat? Right?
And then there's the thing that they have little sneaky ways to coerce your consent and stuff too.
Right.
The idea that you weren't being forced at the border. They told you if you don't show your vax passport, you can't go through. But it's your choice. You can either show your vax passport or leave.
Right.
But that's that'd be the stupid. Like, I can see them doing things like that. To acquire the so-called consent.
Right.
But it doesn't work anyway, because it's inalienable right. You can't even consent. It doesn't make any sense if it's inherent, God-given, natural, human right.
Right. Okay, so let's see if we covered that we do have indeed a constitution. We covered that it cannot be repealed or removed. It's in perpetuity, and what they're trying to essentially do is get you to believe. And that's why I'm going to offer this too. That's why I don't care who it is, folks. I don't need to know what they are, what their background is. As soon as I hear someone in any shape, way, or form try to suggest to me that they have the ability, quote unquote, to take my freedoms away, we are not aligned. I don't care your birth certificate stories. I don't care about your social insurance number stories. I appreciate that there's some information there, and that's fine.
There's several different stories about why we don't have a constitution also.
Right.
And you stay away from those people, because it's a big mind game. Like, in order to flip the script so that the state has all the power, they have to convince the people that you have no rights.
That's right.
So this is how they're trying to do it. They're trying to say all your rights come from the piece of paper. So we take that piece of paper away and boom, you have no rights.
Well, and that's why that statement that the Constitution is not the source of the civil liberties. It's your existence that gives that, but it's a written statement that binds them. And they're trying to, as Jane says, flip the script. And listen, some people are doing it knowingly, and some people are doing it unknowingly because they're aggravated, they're ticked off, or whatever it is. But that's not my business. All I know is either side of that you're on, what you're doing is you are helping the bad people convince people, and you're taking our civil liberties. Well, you're not actually doing it, but you're psychologically disempowering people by making them actually start to believe, oh, I guess we did lose all, or I guess there is no guns. I guess, but no. And that's why anybody who says that in any shape, way, or form, we are not aligned, and I'm not with you. And if you want to listen to that, that's up to you. But I know when I say you, I'm not talking about Jane, because I think me and Jane are on the same picture for sure.
For sure.
But you as the listener of this video, right? Like I'm really moving you to really think about that.
Yeah, I like the concept that William Keats says when he's talking about the Magna Carta and trying to explain to you what the dynamics are. He says that it's either going to be one way or the other. Either the state has all the power and control, all of it, every bit of it, or the people have all the power and control. You can't have a combination because there's no independent arbitrator. It's one way or the other. Right. But he also says, think about this. Who created the state? Oh, the people.
That's right.
So how can the people be subject to their own creation? Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. This is the line that I think I used earlier on when we were chatting about this was, that's like God creates the devil, right?
Yeah.
And the devil says, okay, and now I'm the boss.
Yeah.
No.
Exactly.
No. I created you. That's the difference here. I'm the one who created you. So we created the state, and therefore it's impossible for the state to have the power unless, again, they convince you that they do.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah. So it's just a big mind game. So we can just use our intelligence to completely sidestep these attempts, all of them. And there's many. They're putting a lot of resources into this. I won't get into it today, but in subsequent talks with Shade, I want to discuss astroturfing.
Yes.
Which is done. It's a fake. They're pretending it's grassroots, but it's fake grassroots to try and show support of something that really wouldn't get any significant support. So they have to manipulate the process and give an appearance as though something is being supported. For example, 15-minute cities. And I'm going to stop there because this is a full discussion for that.
That's great. And then I do want to touch upon, before I let you go, I did want to touch upon briefly also that position that we took, because I think we explained to everybody what inalienable really means. So we took care of point 4 there. I think we dealt with the Magna Carta, how that's intact and they can't repeal that either. And of course, we talked already about the Canadian Bill of Rights recognizing and confirming our rights in it, as well as all the rights we already had, right? And that was signed with assent, so there's no arguments there. But now the one thing that I wanted to just briefly touch upon was that jury by trial, how important that is, even for, let's say, more minor. We talked about that briefly today too. Even if it's a minor charge, our answer is yes. So why do we agree, you and I, that trial by jury, access to a jury, even for smaller charges, is necessary? What would you suggest to the people that are listening why that is indeed still important, even if it is for something of a smaller charge or claim?
It's meant, the creators of the Magna Carta meant that to be a process where the people always decide if power is going to be exerted from the state. So each time there's a suggestion that it may be used against, like for your liberty or fining or whatever it is, they want a group of citizens to look at the situation. And the idea is that the citizen is going to be acting independently and impartially. And they're also going to be concerned about making some cockamamie decision that will also affect them as well, right? So this is a beautiful process of keeping ongoing containment of the state. And it does work. And we see, as that has been eroded, how much overreaching and how too big for their britches they've become.
Right.
So we let it get like that. We got to bring it back. And we have all the tools we need, all the legal tools. That's what we've been on about all the time. Bill of Rights is one of the biggest ones. Constitution is the biggest one. If you recognize too the power of your own constitution, because it's attached to the hip to the Magna Carta. So
I
we've
love it.
got it. We've got it all, like a big basket of goodies, and people like they've been trying to hide it, hide the basket,
Hide
and
it.
and Bill of Rights and just the whole concept. They don't even want to talk about juries and the one item, jury nullification, that we've just learned about. The juries have always had and still have, it's been confirmed in a Supreme Court decision, the jury has the right to nullify a law. So we're pushing to have juries for the convoy charges, because we're claiming that the Emergency Act was not brought in legally. It violated a whole number of sections of the Emergency Act, violated people's rights. With the preamble says that they're not allowed to violate your rights, on and on and on. So a jury needs to look at that, because all of the regulations that people were charged with, that were created under the Emergency Act, would be invalid if the Emergency Act was illegally or improperly invoked. So a jury needs to look at that, not a federal government employee. The judge is a federal government employee, appointed and paid for by the government. That's not impartial, and
No
it's not
way.
independent. So it has to be a judge, and this is no, sorry, it has to be jury, and this is very important, because if this isn't rectified, we will in fact have lost our country, because our executives will have established that they have the right to pull out emergency out of their butt without confirming that they've met the criteria for the emergency, use a process that they just make up, violate your rights in the procedure, and then say, too bad, so sad, this is the way we wanted to do it, and then going forward, they could just do the same thing over and over again. So
And you
this
wouldn't have
can't be
lost it.
allowed. We can't allow this.
We can't
We
allow
can't
it.
allow this.
Right.
And this is the people have to do something here. The officials will assist, but they're not going to assist if the people are unaware and uninvolved. They're not.
Yep.
They're going to be too afraid to stick their neck out. So
Yep.
that's why we have to understand it and take a step, like make a voice, like write to your senators, especially because senators have the authority to deal with treason. In fact, that their oath commits them to doing everything in their power to fight treasonous conspiracies, and that's it. That's all their oath is. It's not 10 different things, and that's just one. There's one thing that they're supposed to be there to do, making whatever big salary ongoing. So we got to go to them and say, hello, do your job.
That's right.
We have to do that.
We have to do
you,
that.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Because
your
if we-
senators, get on it.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And our point is because if we if we were to have lost, it wouldn't have been because we didn't have the ability to keep it. It's because we essentially ultimately someone's trying to take it from us, and we didn't stand strong and move forward and go and so we kind of
Exactly.
let them do it, and we don't want them. By the way,
Exactly.
speaking to the nullifying of law, that's another thing a jury does. And what's great to understand on this, guys, is that someone, for example, has a charge. I got the case law right in front of us. Okay, it was a 2006 right there, and when what's going on there is someone is charged with something. So like, i.e., someone is protesting. In Ottawa, let's throw that as an example, okay? And then the charge is brought in front of a jury. Okay, so first of all, they're going to go, well, okay, what's the charge, first of all, and what law did he break? Right? They can ask that question, for example, and if they see that he was protesting, then the jury says, well, he's allowed to protest. Well, in this case, he wasn't. Whoa. What kind of laws are you guys making up here? That's not true. So they can actually nullify the law, not just the charge, the law that they're trying to charge him under. And then what that does is that it removes it from the landscape of the laws, whereas they're trying to make it precedence where it is part of the law, right?
So
and you can do that a lot easier if you don't have a jury.
That's right. So in this case, if the jury nullifies those regulations because they found that the Emergency Act was illegally brought in, that is saving our country. That will literally save our country.
Beautiful. It's a very important message, and because in the preamble, we read it last week, but I think it's very important because that Bill of Rights is there, right? Where it says in the third paragraph of the preamble of the Emergencies Act, folks, with Ascension, it says that in taking such special temporary measures would be subject to the Charter and the Bill of Rights and must have regard to the International Covenant and civil and political rights, particularly with respect to those fundamental, it's including that word, of course, rights that are what? Not to be limited or abridged even in a national emergency. So,
Bingo.
There it is. So this is very, very important in keeping our country intact and its sovereignty as a nation, and trial by jury, very important. Recognizing, folks, that you do indeed have the Canadian Bill of Rights. Let no one tell you otherwise, and that we need to tell them. They're the ones who bound themselves by taking governmental positions. So we tell them what we're okay with, and trials with juries help that be accomplished, because now you're getting a lot of people into the mix that are going to say, hey, wait a minute here now. What kind of laws are you guys implementing here? And that gets rid of has high potential of getting rid of the bad laws, a lot more so than one state paid judge. Yeah. And what it also does is then it really, really does preserve our country in the sense of that jury is basically saying, no, that Emergencies Act should have never been invoked in the first place.
Yep.
And then therefore, they're liable for that. And then we still have our sovereignty. We still have our civil liberties. Not that we don't, but we do. But we're acknowledging them, and we're making them acknowledge it.
Exactly.
And we're not letting them flip the script.
We'll use our juries in full ongoing, and let this be the moment in history where Canadians realize, wait a minute.
Yep.
Our juries are a right, and they are to be provided in all situations.
That is fantastic. Well, Jane, thank you so much. I know we're going to hit a couple more subjects the next time we talk. I just appreciate you being on with me. It really helps. It just helps me stay focused, and I think you're just such a great help to my mental status and my spiritual status.
I was going to say you with me with the spiritual, because I had a bad day the other day when Sheila Lewis and all those different the issues with the kids in the school. We were discussing it a lot, and it really was overwhelming me. But I felt much better after we talked, because really we do have this. We see all of their plans are crumbling. These worldwide plans. Like, we were going to talk about that as time goes on, and I want to talk about astroturfing, and it's not working, and it's not going to work, because people see it. People see it coming. And they're not going down the money trail. No, thank you.
Yeah, I love it. And then we're going to talk about how they didn't go nearly as far as they would have liked to. So be encouraged by that. Yeah. And I think more and more people are starting to hear about it, and so be encouraged by that. And of course, what we're going to try to do next is, now that you guys are affirmed that you know that these civil liberties are yours from conception, and and they're bound, now that you're solidified in that, now we're going to start to talk about ways that you can spot let's say, the games that they try to play to take you out or off of that straight path, right?
Well, one of them is, the courts are corrupt.
That's a
Jordan
move.
Peterson, we have no rights in our country. Look what they did to me. I have no freedom of speech. You know why? Because he used the charter, and they said Section 1 was a good enough reason to override his rights. And did he know better? Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
Dozens of people reached out to him that I'm aware of.
That we're aware of.
Explain to him. And how difficult is it to see the difference?
This dummy sees the difference.
Well, yeah.
He's a smart dude.
All of us were predicting before the first case went through. We were all on air. There'd be videos of us saying, use the charter, this is going to happen. And Period. It did happen. So
and it did.
And this is like a year and a half of these decisions. And he goes like now and says, this country has no rights.
Right. And I find it interesting because now he's saying that we have no freedom of speech, and he's using his freedom of speech to tell us that we don't have freedom of speech. And then it's like, no, man.
Exactly.
See, either you're confused or...
Freedom won two in the last couple of months. Freedom of speech with regard to bail review, and we just had one from Freedom of the Press that came out today, which I can't give you the name yet because
But
the
we will
person's going to
soon.
announce themselves. I will. If he
Yeah.
doesn't, I will. Yeah. So
And
I
that
think he
freedom
will.
of
He just needs time to plan how he's going to do it because he's a
yeah,
celebrity guy.
right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And just to reiterate too, with Dave, what they were telling the guy under like ridiculous bail restrictions that he couldn't even use his email. Like
Yeah,
he couldn't even
exactly.
send an email, "Happy birthday, Joe."
For a year and a
right?
half.
For a year and a half. And what
Yeah.
does the Bill of Rights say? No, 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 no,
Freedom
no.
of speech. It was
Freedom of
fully
speech.
confirmed. Fully
Fully confirmed.
confirmed on
So
the
it was a
bail.
it was a lot
Yeah.
bigger of a win, and they don't want you to know about
Yeah.
those wins, of
Exactly.
course. They want
And they've
you
had two of them,
to.
two different judges. Yeah, within about a month apart.
And
And
this is
now
what Jane
he's
is
got
talking
another one.
about.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
he's
go ahead.
got another one coming up. He doesn't have the decision for it yet. Freedom of assembly, which he's expecting he's going to win that as well because freedom of speech and assembly are tied to the hip. It's
They're
even
tied
in
to
the
the hip.
same number in the bill, right? It's a speech and assembly. So it's hard to it would be hard to imagine that they're going to say, "Well, you have freedom of speech, but not assembly." So you can
Right.
stand there on your soapbox if you're all by yourself, but if you're with other people, you can't
Yeah.
do it. That's stupid.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think he'll do okay with that, and many more. I think that the bureaucrats, the police, and politicians and whatever that are patriotic and are concerned about maintaining our democracy, all that, they're on alert now because CSIS warned people how many months ago, about 2 months ago, that we're being like our institutions are being infiltrated, blah blah blah, and we need to be on alert and plan and act. And I believe I see that they are. Like I think that the seven ministers fired, that wasn't a cabinet shuffle. The media called it a cabinet shuffle. That's not a cabinet shuffle. Cabinet shuffles when they move this minister over to that one and they
Right.
move them all around. That's a shuffle. It's not a shuffle. And these three of them, maybe all of them, I'm not sure, but three of them I saw said that they're not running again either. So some hammer is coming down there, and I doubt if it's a liberal hammer. Why would it be a liberal hammer? Those people did exactly what the Liberal Party was on about,
Yeah.
right? Why would it be a liberal hammer? And also, there's been one charge that I'm aware of uh, with regard to conspiracy, like related to the whole matter. RCMP officer, former RCMP officer, charged with conspiracy and intimidation. And the RCMP said that they've initiated 100 investigations, which doesn't mean just 100 people either. Could be many people in each investigation. And as well, the Chinese police stations in Toronto were shut down. And the RCMP, when they made that one charge, they said this is just the tip of the iceberg, the one charge. So they're promising that there's more charges to come. So I think there is pushback going on within our system, within our police, within our bureaucrats, and our some members of parliament. Some are, in the
Yeah.
WEF, lock, stock, and barrel, and their brain doesn't even function. They just walk around like zombies, doing whatever they're told.
Right.
But there's other ones you can see that make very considered positions, and they take risks, and they do care. You can tell they care. I can tell they care
Yeah,
by the
and it
way they
helps
act.
them. It helps them when we give them something to work with, right?
Exactly.
If we don't give them
Exactly.
anything to work with, you really are asking them to completely walk out there all by themselves and have 1,000 bullets shot at them and hope that it doesn't hit them in the cranium.
And,
Whereas when
and silence, yes, and silence is approval. And don't forget, they did all this Emergency Act stuff in our face. It's not even a secret. And then they had an inquiry and they admitted it. They admitted what they did. They admitted that they didn't go through the process. They didn't meet the definition. They just changed the definition. What the hell? They didn't even talk about that they violated rights. They just kind of like, let's just skip over that. But everybody knows, everybody saw the videos of them beating them up and smashing their trucks and charging them and dragging them off to jail and freezing their bank accounts, all that. We know they did it. So it's in our face. All of that's in our face. So if we just stand back and wait for the heroic police officer or MPP or senator or MP or senator to come charging on the gray horse and save the day. That ain't gonna happen, people. Ain't gonna happen. And if they do anything, it's only because we say, you are public servants. Your job is to police treason, because what they did there was treason, because they used violence and undermined the sovereignty of Canada, and for the purpose of doing that. And they did that in collaboration with foreign entity, World Health or not World, well, World Health too, but World Economic Forum and UN. And they admit it. They fly their name in public that they're members of a foreign power. UN has troops, people, troops. It's a foreign power. It's not a Mickey Mouse Club. Okay, so this is hardcore. At least open your mouth. We're not going to war and guns and whatever. It's a mind game, and the only way we can win it is to pay attention and open your mouth. Open it every chance you get. Talk to your neighbors. Write letters, phone calls, do whatever.
Yeah, and challenge them in discussions. You have to challenge them. Say, listen, if you lose freedom of speech and assembly, then what's going to happen when you want to say or do something, or your next generations? Like, challenge them in those conversations. And if they do this if they can do this to that guy's business, well, what are they going to do to yours? Or what hope does your kid have of having a business? And those are even if that, you're engaging the conversation, you're showing that you're disappointed as to how your big GOV there was operating. And by the way, I'm going to offer this too. Never mistake the bravado and the arrogance for intelligence or wisdom. So a lot of times they like to use that, and don't fall for that. Stay the course.
Always remember the Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
The guy behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what they are. That's what those people are.
Yep. Truth in plain sight there, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not playing with a full package either. 15-minute cities, put your foot down and don't play with those so-called structures that they're putting there. They're not legal structures. We have a structure. Let's use our structure. And if our politicians, our councillors, all that don't use and won't use the structures, which include consultation with us, etc., sue them, and publicly complain about them so they won't be reelected again. We have to get on it, and quickly, not when you get around to it. Like, put some time at least. I know we're all busy. People have jobs and kids and all kinds of things to take care of, but some time has to be dedicated. And as Shade was saying, online, you can do things online too. Keyboard warrior. You can go into various groups and challenge. Like, if you hear somebody saying, charter, use the charter, it's so wonderful. Get on there and say, wait a minute, like, do your research, confirm what we're saying. I'm not saying just follow us around, but just like look up what we're saying and doing, and then pass that word.
Right. And post things like, well, that's funny. You keep saying charter, but, Jordan lost with it and blah, blah, blah. And I've heard of some people winning. I've heard with the Bill of Rights, what's going on here. Even little things like that. Whatever thing that you feel moved in, all of that stuff helps for sure.
Yes, it does.
It keeps you engaged. It keeps you engaged, and that's really important. And then they're going to know that you're engaged too, because they're watching for that stuff too. So this has been great, Jane. Thank you so much. I know you got to go do some stuff, but thank you, and we'll try to reconvene and do another one of these. And I thank you again for spending this time with me today. And
thank you for having me. I love them. I love these. It really, inspires me and makes me feel very optimistic. I feel very optimistic.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jane. I appreciate you so much. God bless you, girl. See you soon,
too.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.